the best art is personal. Like, where would we be without Taylor Swift's heartbreaks? All the stories about the Middle East in the Western media were about oil or war, and very little has changed. But I really wanted to tell other stories. We have so much here about art, music, culture, and travel.
Why this novel?
My main character, Mia, is Palestinian American. Her boss is a Black Jew. And there's all of that tension there, and they like each other, and they're trying to figure out how to make this office romance. I think it's just about having that true diversity. We have so many stories to tell. There's no religion, there's no politics. It's about culture. That's the point. And that's when I thought, this is the turning point. There's a market for this kind of story. Nobody can tell it better than me.
Did you always have that knack for storytelling?
It's a really good question. I think.
Sara, how are you, love?
Good. It's so good to be here.
Oh my gosh. I am so excited to have people finally get to know you. And I feel like when we met instantly in Austin, it was like, yes, soul fam.
Instant connection. You are so warm. Everything you've been through. I read your book and I loved it. So you know what it takes to write a book. So it means a lot to be here.
Oh my goodness. Well, and you have something on the rise as well. We're going to get to it. But I mean, I feel like you've lived so many lives and you've had so many different experiences. I want to start there and tell us about your journey, because you were born in the States. And so tell us the whole thing.
Oh gosh, this makes me feel like I'm old. I was actually born in Kuwait to parents who are Palestinian refugees. My dad lived in Lebanon when he was young. My mom lived in Kuwait. They met there, got married, had me. My father's family moved to California. We ended up going there for a little while after the Gulf War. And that's where the American citizenship came into play. So first grade I did in California. Second grade we moved to Tunisia for my dad's work. He's a civil engineer building roads where they didn't exist before.
Wow.
My mom's an architect, so similar field. Then from Tunisia to Greece. And then I lived there for 10 years before going to college in the States, back to California, Berkeley. And then I think because of all these experiences I had when I was young, I love stories and being around people from everywhere. So when a job opportunity came up in Dubai, I thought, amazing. I don't know anybody there. I don't know anything about it. Let's do this. So I moved here to work at a bank. It was Merrill Lynch. It's hard to imagine me working at a bank because it's the complete wrong job for me. But when you're in your 20s, I think it's time to make mistakes. And my transition into becoming a writer happened 2 years into that job where I was just not really feeling like I was a fit. We had to stay in the office late once a month to take stock market orders until 3 a.m. And I was there in the quiet, empty office, drumming my fingers when it was my rotation. And I was leafing through a magazine and I saw that they said, if you have story ideas, please submit one. So I just wrote up a story about an IPO because I worked in that space. And I submitted it. And I woke up the next morning to a job interview. They said, come and work for us. And I'm like, amazing. A third of the salary, but I'll be a writer. Okay, let's do this.
Oh, wow.
So then I became a journalist, worked for a handful of different outlets here. And then I think I just wanted
So from banking to journalism.
Yeah.
Incredible. So did you always have that knack for storytelling?
I think so. I think we all do. We're all attracted to hearing different stories. It's what makes us human. And I think I needed to figure out a way to do that, not as a hobby. And journalism was that way. And it was just the best training at having a good eye for what's a good story, good people to interview, a good soundbite, a good dialogue. So in a way, it was my training to eventually write the novel. And I think I wanted to learn how to do it on an international level. Like, am I just good for Dubai, this small market, or am I actually good? Can I make myself a better writer, a better storyteller? So then I went to New York, Columbia, master's in journalism. Then I came back and worked for the New York Times for 6 years, writing for them. And my very first story was an interview about stand-up comedy with my husband.
No way. Yeah. Wait, stand-up comedy with your husband?
So he is really passionate about comedy. And he has this TED Talk in Oxford, big stage, has 1 million+ views. He was at the time the director of content for a broadcast network called Showtime. And he was in charge of putting comedy on the big screen in the Middle East. And at the time, this was 2012, I think, all the stories about the Middle East in the Western media were about oil or war, and very little has changed. But I really wanted to tell other stories. We have so much here about art and music and culture and travel. So I pitched a story about stand-up comedy. And everyone I met, all these different comedians and producers of shows would tell me, if you want to write about comedy, you need to meet Jamil. So I met Jamil.
Oh my
And then
goodness.
we were just friends for a couple of years before it turned romantic.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
I feel like, I mean, stand-up comedy was one of the things that I took twice, you know, when I was like in my healing journey. And so I feel like comedy just unites us all. And you can get away with a lot of things
Yeah.
by, you know, educating and using comedy as the forefront. So I love that that brought you together.
Yeah. It's like harsh philosophy. And at the same time, I think we ended up having our own little bit with comedy because I used to be absolutely terrified of public speaking. I would get sweaty palms and shaky, and like my breath would start to, you know, standard public speaking fear.
Yeah.
And because I wrote for the New York Times, I would always get asked to moderate at conferences and panels. I'd turn it down, just flat out no. And he would tell me, you need to get up there. You need to be there to tell the stories and do the interviews and just get over this. So he enrolled me in a stand-up comedy course. So we did it together for 6 weeks.
You guys did it together.
It was a wedding gift from somebody. So for 6 Saturdays, for 3 hours, 6 Saturdays, had to learn how to work with my voice, my posture, making things funny. It's a different form of storytelling. And I think that's what attracted me. And then I got it. And ever since then, I can't do stand-up comedy. I will not get up in front of shows.
Have you done your 5-minute set?
I did my 1-minute set. That was like the final exam, and it was terrifying but fun, and one of these things of like we worked through it together and I conquered this fear, and he's always that supportive of me, and it's great. He was here taking photos before we started.
He's so sweet.
He is. But it helped me get over this fear, and now when I'm at this stage in my life, 10 years later, when I regularly do this, that's the seed where it started.
It's so fascinating how some of our biggest support is, you know, like our number one fans. And so take us through, you know, for you to actually, I wanted to kind of double click on you wanting to write this particular novel. Like, why this novel? Why? And was it kind of a culmination of other things that you had written in the past? What led you to wanting this novel?
It's a really good question. And I think this story was always in me. It's such a personal one, but I think the best art is personal. Like, where would we be without Taylor Swift's heartbreaks? And, you know, the best art is personal. I think it took me a while to get there. But the reason why I told you so much about the stand-up comedy and my interest in it and my background in it is because my main character is a stand-up comedian, and she's an Arab American woman in New York. And a lot of it is loosely based on my own experiences when I lived there when I went to Colombia. So there was definitely that personal thread. But of course, in fiction, there's a license to play, and she's working, my main character, Mia, is working in a publishing house. She's in love with her boss. There's a bit of that social commentary, social and cultural tension. She is Palestinian American. Her boss is a Black Jew. And there's all of that tension there, and they like each other, and they're trying to figure out how to make this office romance okay. And in the book, she finds a diary that belongs to her grandmother from Jaffa, Palestine, 1947. And it just, she discovers about her grandmother's illicit love affair with a British soldier. And it just takes you back to that time when it was these small villages and the stories there and the stone houses and the fig trees. And there was a lot of that in like historical fiction. So I think hearing these stories from my grandmother and doing the research and learning a little bit more about Palestinian identity, Palestinian American identity.
Right. Because
It
it's
was
so
all like a
different.
growing experience for me, and especially in these times, we see that. It's a natural, tense conflict that for a storyteller like me is very appealing, and I had to really dig deep to be able to figure out where it hurts and press it and tell that story. So there's a lot of very raw emotion there. There's no religion, there's no politics. It's about culture. And I think when you were asking why I wanted to tell this story, it goes back to what I was saying earlier about the pieces that I wrote for the New York Times. Most of the narratives that come out of the Middle East, especially, you know, always I would say, but lately,
Even now.
war, politics, religion, oil, we have more than one side. And I think I would love for my daughter to see a new thread of stories that are centered around culture and art and beauty and love and empathy.
And you see
Because
that when
that's
you
there.
travel here. I
Good.
mean, it's all over. And it's so good to, you know, even be back 10 years later where I'm like, oh my
It's
goodness,
changed.
fully. Fully, it's not like the Vegas of the East, you know. It's not, as probably what it was called, maybe, or how it felt like 10 years ago. There's so much of a love of culture and art and just and beauty, and of course there's the bigness, but you can also have, you know, the spirituality, and it's huge that you're now at this time where it's a big deal. It's a big deal to be a Palestinian writer, to tell their stories, to amplify their voices. So, what was that journey of even, and why did it take you about 10 years for this to kind of come about?
I think part of it was holding myself back, thinking, why would anyone care about a story about a Palestinian woman or a Palestinian American woman? Those are my two lead protagonists. But I think what we've seen, especially in the last 10 years, and because I work in tech, is a difference in the way that we consume and produce content. So now we have things like platforms like Netflix, where you see a lot more diversity. I don't know if this story would have had a place 20 years ago, maybe 10 years ago, but now definitely people want to see stories from all different parts of the world. I am Palestinian American, yes, but I read and watch TV shows widely about people from everywhere in the world. And I think that's the point. I think it's just about contributing to that. Here's our little piece too. I mentioned to you that I grew up in Greece. I also plan to write a work that takes place in Greece. I think it's just about having that true diversity. We have so many stories to tell. And the reason why it took me a long time is because I think I was still figuring out what I wanted to say. What's my debut going to be? I always wanted to write. And I would always write these little scenes and keep them in my drawer, handwritten scenes. One day in the pandemic, 2020, total burnout, had left my job of 6 years at Google. I was the editor of Think with Google, working around the clock. 2 kids under the age of 5, homeschooling, tired woman. Quit, no plan. I was like, okay, maybe this is my great reset. Maybe now's the time to focus on this novel. And I saw this competition on Twitter. I follow Netflix on Twitter. And it said, submit a 1-page story that has to do with a protagonist that has the same cultural background as you, whatever it is. And I open my drawer and I pull out a story that I had written 10 years before that was exactly 1 page when I typed it up. And it's just a scene about a Palestinian American woman in New York praying and then thinking about a boy she likes and feeling guilty about that, and then making plans to head out to a bar with her sister. That was a scene. Submitted it, forgot about it. 6 months later, still in the middle of the pandemic, still no clue what I'm doing with my life. Freelancing for newspapers just to keep my foot in the door. Get an email saying, please come to London for the awards ceremony. You're winning a prize for this short story. And that's when I thought, okay, this is the turning point. There's a market for this kind of story. Nobody can tell it better than me. I own this. I can do this. And I pulled in all these things that I love, the comedy, the love, the expectations that society places on women and who they choose to partner with. I wrapped it all up in a tidy little bow, and suddenly it was this beautiful novel. And things snowballed after that Netflix prize.
So you actually won the Netflix storytelling.
I was runner-up.
Okay.
They gave 3 people a prize, so I was first runner-up.
I mean, you were a winner.
Deal.
Still a big deal. You won. You won in our eyes.
Thank you.
That's huge.
Yeah, it was a big deal. That was in 2021.
Wow. And so then when you had this is obviously like the green light.
Finally.
For you to say, okay, I can actually make this a reality. And then what happens?
So right before winning that award, I had written another full-length novel called Disconnected. It didn't have to do with my cultural heritage. It actually was about a woman who's addicted to the digital world. And I wrote it before the pandemic. So she lives her life on Zoom and orders her groceries. It was like a weird foreshadowing. And in order to get a promotion at work, she has to go to a Greek island with no Wi-Fi to prove that she can still have healthy relationships. And she falls in love with an innkeeper. And the reason why she's addicted to the digital world, and like the big reveal, is that her husband had died years ago and she kept in touch with him through AI. So it was this like sweet, emotional, romantic comedy that also explores our relationship with tech. Because I've worked in that industry for over 10 years. It's my day-to-day. I still do it now.
Wow.
And I queried that to agents and just kept flat out getting rejected. And I just thought, I'm never going to get anywhere with this. And that's when the Netflix award came up for the short piece that I'd written years ago. So I thought maybe I need to pay attention to this first, get that out there, and then I'll fix up book 1.
And for all the writers or the wannabe writers or the wannabe the curious authors out there who are like, this year is my year to write my story. This year is the year to write that thing that I've been wanting to. It's literally in my bones to do. What maybe is your advice to them?
I think you just need to sit down and write. There's a lot that we put in front of ourselves as hurdles. What are people going to think about this? Can I do it? Do I suck? Am I good enough? Do I need more practice? Am I too old? Am I too young? All of these things are just, you have to let the clouds part and just sit your butt down in front of the computer and figure out your own rhythm. So I'm a naturally very disciplined person. I'm very, very structured. I like routine. So for me, it helped to say every single morning, my 20 minutes to write. Right after I drop the kids off at school and exercise, we're going to sit and write. And I just did that consistently for a year, 20 minutes a day. And I had a novel at the end of the year. I have writer friends who hate that, and instead they need to like light their scented candle and wait for the inspiration and then write in these bursts. So they'll lock themselves in a hotel room for 2 days and just write. So I think you need to sit with yourself and say, okay, what works for you? What's the best way to get this story out? And then go get on that train and just go. I think there's no perfect situation. You're never going to have time. I wrote this novel when I was working full time and had 2 children, and you know, there's never a right time. So you just have to figure it out if you want it badly enough. I remember coming back from my second maternity leave. I was still working at the Google job at the time and sitting with my friend on day 1, and she said, welcome back, and how are you feeling? And I was telling her, you know, I just feel like I'm never going to get to this novel now. I have a new baby and this job. And she said, well, maybe that's okay. Maybe you have to feel like that's okay. You're putting a lot of pressure on yourself. And that was like no, that is just not okay. Flat out, I have to find a way to make this somehow, some way, a priority. And I think if you want it badly enough, for every artist, you find a way. It's like if you're a singer and you love to sing in the shower. It's something that comes naturally. It's not a chore. I love to write. I have pages in my drawer just full because it brings me joy. So I think you have to get back to that place of joy rather than it feeling like work. How did it feel like for you writing your book?
I mean, I resonate with a lot of what you shared in terms of the differences. And I feel like I think that I share the same sentiments with you, having birthed my second baby, my daughter, there was just something in me that's like, ooh, okay. And because I was also rejected by like 27 publishers, but I was very, very pregnant. I was like, I don't know, 30, like 5 or 36 weeks pregnant. She came early.
My daughter did too.
Yeah. So this is what happens,
They can't
right?
wait.
They can't wait. And it was like, yeah, because she was born at 37 weeks. And so, it was like 2 weeks in and I'm like, you know what, maybe I should just like let this go and just not, push until maybe baby is like 6 months later. Maybe this is the universe telling me to just slow down. And then when I just like let that go and I went into labor, my agent calls me and says, hey, we pitched another round and we're in this bidding war. I'm like, well, I'm, in the hospital. I just had my daughter. My husband's like, is this necessary to do right now? I was like, well, kind of it is. And so that was just like the whole, humor in it all. It's like when you let it go, it happens. But then they gave me 6 months to write this book. And, 6 months while you have a newborn, while you have a 2.5-year-old, it was just insane. And so I got my editor who then would for this book, I basically kind of orated it and she would transcribe it. And then at the end of in December, when I was able to leave for a few days, because I generally do that. And that's what I'm the one that locks myself in a room. But then I was able to get all of the transcriptions and basically a big ball of manuscript and then just like go through because, I had evolved a lot during this time and, there were certain things that I didn't really relate to anymore that I wanted to write, or there were more things that I wanted to add in. So I think that whole creative genius process was a messy one. But then again, my book is like how to embrace the joy and chaos.
Yeah.
Find magic in the mess. So
you walk the walk.
So it's, it's a little different, but I can only imagine writing fiction. And while, this is like the big story and this is part your life, you can, the daydreaming and the fun that it can bring out can just be ongoing. Mm-hmm. And so when did you know that it was time to pitch this novel? Because this was the novel that would get you, this huge 6-figure deal. So tell us about that.
Well, first, I just want to say I resonated so much with what you said about letting go and surrendering before things happen is a big learning for me because I like control and I'm very structured. And how else are you going to work and have 2 kids and look nice and, all these things? You need to be organized.
Right.
I'm very organized.
Yeah.
But I had to learn to let go, surrender, and let things happen in their time when it is the right timing. So getting over that hump of initial rejections on my first book, getting through that low, telling myself I'm still good enough in order to get to the place where I got the bidding war and the agents fighting over it and the publishers and all of that. I think I needed to work through that process and remind myself that I do this because I just love it and I can't not. I love to tell stories. I love to write and I happen to be good at it. So I got over that whole I need to get published and it just became I need to tell the best story I can tell. And that's what worked. And then the second thing about just being a mother with so much on your plate, I think having the kids makes you realize you need to reassess your priorities. Yeah. And this was one for me. It became a non-negotiable. And I had to learn how to fit that in. It's exactly what you were saying.
But I mean,
so those 2 things.
And I just want to say for those listening, this is a huge deal because to get an American publisher to publish somebody that is not even from the U.S.
I am American.
Well, yes, but I mean, but not you're not living there,
yes.
and you're writing this story that is, obviously so profound, but it's also a fiction, which is also even harder to get, and that to over 6-figure book deal, that is huge. So I just want to say congratulations.
Thank you so much. It's still surreal to talk about it.
It's no small feat, and it's just kind of I'm so excited about the book. You have to tell us what the title is.
The title is What Will People Think? And I think as women all around the world, we've grown up with the aunties and people giving us this phrase when we dressed a certain way or chose a certain major or talked about a certain boy. So I think, yes, it is a story told through the eyes of a Palestinian American, but the themes are so universal. And this is why there was such big appeal. And I'm very excited about it because it's been a work in progress for so long and it's been worked on for so long. It's polished. I can't wait for it to come out early 2025.
Well, we'll have to bring you back because I think that, you know, now everyone's getting a sense of knowing about you and knowing your story and your full journey. And I think it's time, you know, and how poignant that it's going to be coming out in a year. So as we kind of wrap up and do our igniting round, what are you braving at the moment?
I'm braving meeting my dream coming to reality head on because we're so used to working through problems. Suddenly things work out and you're like, okay, anything I need to be worried about? But I've worked for this. I've earned it. I need to learn how to surrender, sit in that place and let things play out. And I think one thing that I've learned that I would love to share is that it's very important to ask for help because I'm a strong woman. I've studied at the Ivy Leagues and worked in the great brands and all of that stuff. But that strength means that I've had an army of support and I've learned how to ask for help when I really need it. When my daughter was born, I got a night nurse because sleep deprivation is real. It's really, really hard.
There's no creativity that comes from that.
No, there's
Zero.
Nothing that comes from that. And I think people just assume that, you know, this is part of it. Get over yourself. But no, I think it takes a lot of strength to come up and say, this is something I really struggle with and I need help. And that's one example from motherhood. But with the book, I had so much help along the way. After I wrote that manuscript, I actually won a spot in the Emirates Literature Foundation's fellowship. I was one of 10 people in their inaugural first cohort. Sometimes when you're prepared, the stars align. And this was another example. That Netflix award with The Story in the Drawer is one. And this Emirates Lit Fest Fellowship was the second, where I was ready. I had 2 manuscripts complete, ready. When they suddenly announced, we're looking for writers who want to make it big on a global stage. If you have a manuscript, even if it's incomplete, please submit. And I was ready. I submitted. I won my spot. So I had a dedicated mentor. They flew us out to New York to do writing workshops. I had an editor look over it. So this thing was like perfect when I submitted to agents. I knew that I would get a nibble, but I was pleasantly surprised when I got 5 agents who really wanted to represent me. And then 2 of them partnered up. So now I have an agent in New York, Meredith Miller at United Talent Agency, powerhouse, amazing. We connected. And UTA owns Curtis Brown, which is one of the best literary agencies in the UK. So Sheila Crowley is my other agent. The 2 of them represent me. And they together helped me do another couple round of edits before we finally got this manuscript in such tip-top shape that then there was a bidding auction. And the 3 publishers who were interested came in with 3 6-figure deals. And I was like, what? I just want to get published. I'm this nobody writer in a tiny town across the world. And here suddenly I was like playing with the big boys. So when you're talking about braving, I think it's owning that space. I'm this unknown, soft-spoken person around the world. And suddenly I have to learn to be like, yeah, that is me. And that doesn't come from a place of arrogance or fake it till you make it. This is me. This is me. Be proud of it.
You've
Own
arrived.
that. I'm arriving.
You've arrived.
There. The book's not even out yet, but I'm trying to talk to people like you and just drum up that interest. And again, it's because we didn't have these kind of role models growing up. So now try to think of somebody who's made it big on that global stage from here in this way. Didn't exist. This book deal is a regional first. That's pressure, but it's a wow moment. And I'm hoping that paves the way for more and more. So now paying it forward, my agents are coming to the Middle East for the Emirates Lit Fest in 2024 in February. So writers here are going to have a chance to pitch to them. I didn't have that kind of opportunity.
Right.
And it's amazing. We're going to have more stories coming out of the region, more strong women.
Because of you.
Let's do this. Me and the Lit Fest and all of the people who are committed to making the world a better place with better stories.
Yeah, and it's time. And one word that describes the season of life.
I would say spring after a long, long, long cold winter. And the reason I say that is because not only are these wonderful things that I've manifested for so long, you know, dreaming about it and holding up a shampoo bottle like it's a Pulitzer, you know, in the shower. Not only because of this moment, but because I've worked so hard on myself the last couple of years to actively manage stress. And I think it's something that isn't taught. You are taught to go for the big job and manage your household and take care of your children, take care of everyone but you. But through important friendships, like with Tehzeeb Ahmed, who you're going to be speaking to, I've learned the power of meditation, of taking time to myself, of slowing down. I'm not good at slowing down. I had to actively learn it. And now I make it a point. I think if we don't take care of ourselves, things will crumble and our creativity will dry out. Mm-hmm. So I've learned that power. Spring comes from taking care of the soil, watering it, getting the sunshine, getting the rest. This is the most important learning I've had out of this entire experience.
I can't wait for the book to come out. I can't wait for people to start hearing about what will people think.
Thank you.
Hopefully you already have that hashtag or whatever it is.
It's a good idea. I should actually.
Probably the handle, whatever you need. You know, we're always here to support, and I can't wait to bring you back when the book is here.
Thank you. And thank you so much for the support. I mean, even just talking about it this way makes it feel real. And I think your energy is so lovely. So thank you for having me. Thank you for letting me share this story. I think you're so inspiring.
The feeling is mutual. Until next time on the Brave Table. For those of you who think that this is a red flag, if you are fighting too much, you've got this thing all wrong. What is making you fear having conflict in relationships? Having conflict in relationships, that's a good thing. It allows you to navigate those waters. It allows you to figure out what your differences are and really work together. And not only that, but even get closer and build new bonds in the process.